Educate, inspire, change. Educate yourself, inspire others, change the world. So, welcome to my podcast. My first guest on the podcast was, believe it or not, David Icke. So, this was my first time actually ever interviewing anyone for the podcast, and I feel like I was jumping in at the deep end with David, him being such an experienced guest and speaker. I remember the day quite well because we were travelling by train down to London from Glasgow to meet David, and we were a little bit delayed in getting there. So when we got to the hotel room, I was just immediately presented with David, and I think he wasn't too happy because we got there maybe a few minutes late. But nevertheless, it was an amazing podcast, and I was really honoured and a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest with you, to have David as my first guest. And him being such a powerful speaker, he kind of led the conversation. I found it very hard to get a word in, but I still think that's actually a good thing because David has so much to say, he's got so much knowledge. I was really honoured to be in his presence and privileged to be able to kind of learn from him. We spoke about a lot of things from ranging from his childhood and how he progressed into adulthood, his journey and the transformation he experienced, how he overcame a lot of rejection, a lot of ridicule in his own life. We speak about his own kind of mystical experiences, how he downloads all the information that he has. We even touch on a little bit of plant medicine and a wide range of other topics. So I really hope that you enjoy the podcast. And So finally, we're on, David.
We're on.
First of all, let me express my gratitude for having you on the show. I've been following you for many, many years. I think you're a big reason behind raising the consciousness of the planet. You've definitely helped my thinking over the years. And this year, especially for me, has been a very transformational year. I took plant medicine, and during that journey, it kind of gave me the inspiration and the encouragement I needed to create this podcast. And I don't think it's by chance that you're one of the first guests on the show, because I think you've got a lot to say, a lot to offer. I can't wait to get into some of the topics that we've discussed already. So let's start. I'm interested to know a bit more about you. Obviously, I've seen a lot of your interviews, but tell me a little bit about your childhood. Did you always know something was a bit different about the way you thought, as a child, for example?
Not in a really kind of tangible way, but I always felt from a little kid that I'd come here to do something. And then I got this real love for football, soccer as they call it in America. And I thought that was it. I've come here to be a footballer. Well, that ain't actually how it turned out. But I did have that feeling. I'm here to do something, but I didn't know what. And as a kid, even a small kid, I was daydreaming all the time. And I still do that now. I mean, most of my life is spent daydreaming. It's almost like suspending the conscious mind in terms of complete focus on the conscious mind or of the conscious mind. And it kind of lets other insights in, which kind of severe focus on the five sense world kind of shuts out. So what I'm doing now in terms of the way I daydream is pretty much what I've been doing all my life. But I was born in a working class background, as they call it, in Leicester, in a council house in Leicester. My brother still lives there, actually. And I went to school because I had to, but I didn't really concentrate much. In fact, I went to school to be with my mates and play for the football team. The rest of it just passed me by. I would, at the start of each term, I would make sure I was at the front of the queue going into the different classrooms for the different subjects at the start of the year. So I'd get the desk by the window, which looked out on a sports field, and I could watch the kids playing football and stuff. And the mantra of my school life was, "Ike, stop daydreaming. Look this way." And I'm thinking, this is much more interesting than what you're saying, mate. You know what I mean? And so I left school at 15 to be a professional footballer. Never passed an exam in my life, a kind of a major exam, of course, never took any. You could do that in those days. And I've not missed it at all. And of course, one of the things that I really exposed at every opportunity is the way that the so-called education system is actually a perceptual programming operation. It's what it really is. And I wasn't subject to that programming because never concentrated, never listened much really. I mean, I wasn't a disruptive kid, but I weren't bothered really. And I just wanted to be a footballer. And then became a footballer, and almost the moment, within 6 months of becoming a footballer, my arthritis started to appear. And I played until I was 21 in more and more pain because of the arthritis, which was a great thing for me looking to what was coming. And this is the thing, really about my life, is when I look back at it, all the things that I went through, I have no idea what was coming, but all the things that I went through were fantastic preparation for what actually eventually unfolded. So when you're warming up at a training session every morning in agony until the joints were warm and moving, then that does trigger some kind of determination in you, because it's very easy to give up. And then I went into journalism when my football career ended with arthritis, went into print journalism, into radio journalism, into television journalism. I needed to understand the mainstream media by the time things really happened in my life, and that gave me that. It also gave me a lot of communication skills that come from working in the media. I then became a national spokesman for the British Green Party in a ludicrously short time. It was ridiculous how fast it happened. That gave me an insight, two things. One, into politics from the inside, which was very valuable from where I'm coming from now. And the other thing, it gave me an insight into the environmental activist mentality, which has become extremely useful in the light of current events, where the environment is being used as an excuse to create a global centralized dictatorship to save the world from climate change. And then the real key is that when I started having my paranormal experiences in 1989, and of course we have to call them paranormal because they're different from the normal, even though they're actually perfectly normal, they're different from the program normal, so we have to call them paranormal. Then when I was going public with that in 1991, and the Wogan Show and all that stuff, I was subject to historic levels of ridicule. I mean, historic. I couldn't walk down any street without being laughed at. You couldn't go in a bar. It was uproar. And my name was mentioned on the television, big laugh. And what that did was the most important thing in my life. I have this phrase I use sometimes. Life gives you, or tends to give you, your greatest gifts brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. And that was a nightmare experience. Of course it is, when everyone seems to think you're completely insane and say so and laugh at you. And families and their kids are laughing at you in the street and stuff. But it was a gift for this reason. It allowed me to let go of the fear of what other people think. And that's the prison that most people live in. They don't live their life. They don't live their truth. They live a version of life that they think is acceptable and in sync with those people around them. What will my mother say? What will my father say? What will the people at work say? All that stuff. What will the people down the bar say? And increasingly, of course, with social media and the woke mentality, note, not awakened mentality, woke mentality, we're having what people can say and what opinions they can have ever more fiercely policed, and people intimidated into acquiescing to a woke narrative, which is fast asleep, by the way. And so there's more pressure today to fear what other people think than ever there has been, or certainly in my lifetime. Of course, back in the days of the Inquisition, it would have been even worse. But then again, that's where we're moving towards now, this whole concept of Inquisition. This is what this woke political correctness is. And instead of assassinating you, they assassinate your character. But, where's it going to go?
It sounds to me like you had a very strong intuition from a very young age. And it's almost like your higher self or your intuition was guiding you into like positions where you had to struggle and resist. And this was almost priming you for what you're doing today. Because you wouldn't be the man you are today if you hadn't been through all the struggles that you've been through in the past.
That's a really important point that I think people need to ponder on. If you look at where you are, whoever you are, look at where you are, and look at what you've learned. Look at what's made you mature. Look at what's opened your mind. Look at what's giving you compassion and empathy for other people. And it won't be the nice experiences you've had, nice as it would be to have more of them. It's the challenging experiences you've had that have given you most. And that was certainly the case with me. Like I say, having the arthritis, my whole childhood, I want to be a footballer. And do you know something? Talk about intuition. I knew I was going to be a footballer.
Really?
The chances of being a professional goalkeeper, in those days, they are now just about the same, I think, but there were 92 league clubs then. Mm-hmm. On a Saturday, you had only 92 chances out of, 60 million people, as was then, to play in a professional football team on a Saturday. So the chances of it being you and not all these other kids that wanted to do the same was minimal. But I just knew somewhere here I was going to be a footballer. So when the careers people were saying, what are you going to be when you leave school? And I said, I'm going to be a footballer. And it was almost a snigger. Oh, you really? A footballer? Mm-hmm. And, my father used to say, you'll never make a living kicking that ball about. When I was kicking a ball about, I said, I will. I didn't make it for long, mind, but I did make it.
Yeah.
And it weren't much of a living, I can tell you. It weren't like the Premiership today.
No.
But intuitively, I kind of knew it. But if I'd have continued to be a footballer and played till I was, 35, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
No.
I wouldn't be the person I am now. So having that massive disappointment at the age of just 21 when my career ended, not only did my career end, I was being told I could be in a wheelchair in my 30s because this was a progressive disease, rheumatoid arthritis. That is a big challenge for a kid just 21 to face. But, you either sit down and feel sorry for yourself and you become a victim, yep. Which is what this whole woke mentality is about, by the way. It is, and this all that goes with it in the background, in the shadows where this is really coming from. It's to persuade people that they are victims,
yeah,
and that they are being oppressed.
Yep.
Does oppression happen? Yes. But if you perceive yourself to be a victim of oppression, you are giving your power away to that oppression.
100%. Yeah.
And so I decided at the age of 21, I wasn't going to I'd use this language in those days, of course, but I was not going to give my power away to this massive disappointment that I'd had manifest in my life. And that basically took the form of not giving my power away, but I ain't giving up. So I then decided what happened is when my football career finished, I was interviewed on a television program in the Midlands where I played football, a live program, one of these evening regional programs,
Yep.
about my career ending, right? So I've never been in a television studio in my life before. So I walk in this television studio and it's a live interview and someone's reading the news in one part of the studio and I'm being asked to tiptoe across to these seats where I was going to be interviewed. And I looked around. And I thought, Icke, this is for you, son.
Really?
Right? My career's just finished, like days before. And I asked the guy, I said, how do you get into this? And, basically, you need to get into journalism. So but that was the next thing. How do I get into journalism? And I got into journalism on the bottom of the bottom of the bottom rung, by the way, on a newspaper in Leicester called the Leicester Advertiser that was just about barely read by the people that wrote it, But it was the start of the journey that took me to the BBC and all that stuff. But the point is, my father gave me a lot of great advice. And one of the things he said to me when I was a kid is, you're never finished until you sit down in a chair and you say, I'm finished. Doesn't matter what people say about you, doesn't matter what people do about you, until you accept. What was he actually saying? Until you accept you're a victim, you won't be.
Yeah.
And I hope woke people will just take that on board.
I really admire this about you as well, because what you've done in the face of adversity is if you've used those struggles, instead of giving your power away, as you put it, you're using that as fuel to give yourself more power. And I think sometimes when you achieve so much in your life and you've been given so much knowledge and you've acquired that knowledge yourself, it's almost because you've put yourself in that position to receive that knowledge, It's there for everyone to receive,
Sure.
but only certain people are equipped or have the mental attitude or the spirit to be able to receive that kind of information and to be able to use that strength to then convey it to other people, because you've endured a lot of kind of ridicule, a lot of hatred, a lot of backlash throughout your entire life, and you've always kind of just faced up front to it, and it's almost like you've been invincible to it. It just deflects off you. The negative energy just deflects off you because you yourself are vibrating so fast and so high that negative energy doesn't seem to penetrate you
In one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Not touch the sides. And that's a kind of a point, really. What has happened, and I do keep mentioning this woke mentality because I think it's devastating, not just for the world, I think and freedom of speech, etc. It's devastating for the people, particularly the young people that go down this road. They're being scammed.
Yeah.
They're being told they're victims. In other words, they're being told they're powerless, in effect. And they're being told to be offended. And they're being told to be offended for a simple reason. When you have a situation which we're now reached, where being offended trumps freedom of speech, then the more people you can get to be offended about more subjects, the more excuses you have to silence free speech about those subjects. So these young people who are being mesmerized by this woke propaganda, this woke software program, I would call it, are actually simply being used as assets to destroy freedom of speech, vehicles to destroy freedom of speech. So let's look at this thing. Now, you must be offended. What you've said has offended me. Oh, really? Now, let's just take that sentence and break it down. What you've just said, okay, so my right to have my opinion has, what has it done? It's offended me. Now, offended you. Therefore, you have taken the decision to be offended. Do you know you can take another decision, which is not to be offended? Because you being offended is not the result of what you say has offended you. It's the result of you making the choice to be offended. And I do have to laugh, mate, really. I chuckle to myself sometimes when I see people in interviews saying what they're offended about. Oh, they've said that. He never said they, he said he and she. He never said they, and that's offended me. If they had have been standing by my shoulder over a period of decades, they would know what it's like to be offended if they chose to be offended.
Yeah.
When you can't walk down any street without being laughed at, when people are constantly ridiculing you on the internet, when comedians are using your name just to get a joke, no joke necessary, just your name, I had every frickin' right to be deeply offended and outraged by being treated like that.
Yeah. I think
I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't. Why? Because if I had been, I would be giving my power to that which was abusing me. I refused to do that. I am in my power. and I will choose how I respond to what's thrown at me. I will not respond in a way that gives my power away, which is being offended. I'm offended. Well, choose not to be. End of story.
I've never looked at you in this way, because you can actually be quite a strong advocate for people who suffer from mental health, which is a massive problem worldwide these days. But I think your example, what you've been through and how you've overcame that, can be like a source of inspiration for lots of people out there who are maybe being persecuted for their sexuality or their colour or their beliefs or whatever it is that upsets them or knocks their energy off. I think you're definitely a shining example of inspiration.
Well, that's the irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the irony. I'm saying to minorities in all their different forms that get abuse, and it is in so many ways overplayed, by the way, so that more people are offended and therefore more people can be silenced. So you can look at it that way, as you rightly point out, that what I'm saying is actually you have a choice not to be offended and therefore not to give your power away. Because, if someone says to me, you know what I think of you, you're a so-and-so, you're a so-and-so, so-and-so, and you're that, and that, you're okay, when people do that to me, I'll go, well, thanks for sharing that with me. All the best.
Yeah.
Have a nice day. So what? So if you said to someone who's offended, what do you think of that person who's offended you? Well, they're an idiot. So what are you being offended by an idiot for?
Exactly. Yeah.
The way that people are being manipulated to give their power away is just, it's a tidal wave today. Yeah. And you don't have to be. And these letters like LGBT, right? And the letters have now gone down here somewhere, added to all the time, as people feel the need to describe themselves, their self-identity, in the minutiae of detail. I am this. And I say to those people, well, you're gay, right? Yeah. You're transgender, right? Yeah. You're this, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you live your life? Why don't you just live your life in that way as you see fit? Why do you feel the need to impose your version of reality on everyone else? You see, I don't agree with any of the religions. I mean, I will have, in terms of some of the things they say, I will agree with. But I don't follow any what my father used to call bricks and mortar religion. Yeah. But I wouldn't even consider telling people that they can't follow a religion or they shouldn't follow a religion. It's none of my business. What I can do is put information out there that might put a different way of looking at the world and reality. Yeah, that's it. But it's not my business to tell you or anyone else what they should believe or what they should say. Yep. If people are abusing me and I say they should be silenced from abusing me, then how can I talk about freedom of speech? Yeah. Because I may not agree with what those people say about me, but I defend their right to say it. Well, aren't you offended? No, I'm not offended. You know what offends me? People telling other people what they can and cannot say and what they can and cannot think, because that's the road to tyranny.
100%. This brings me on to an interesting topic. You're speaking about religion. A lot of people have recently been saying about the sources of religion, people like Moses or Muhammad or Jesus, and how a lot of what they experienced might have been down to psychedelic-induced trips or experiences. What do you think about that? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I think there are religious icons that can be supported by historical fact. And I think there are others that can't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in the whole concept of Jesus, and I actually don't believe in Moses either.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the story of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
if you like the symbolic story of
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, you find that in cultures all over the world.
Yeah, very much.
They just use different names and put the hero in a different historical setting.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the story, that is different to making it literal,
Mm-hmm.
which is why there's outside the Bible virtually no support for the existence of Jesus. And of course, if he was doing the things that he was supposed to have done, the Bible wouldn't be basically the only source of that. And the story mirrors older stories so in such a synchronistic way that it's clearly a tale.
Yeah.
That is because so many stories, especially in ancient history, were not told from their literal meaning, but from their symbolic meaning. And I think so many things that were delivered symbolically, then over time solidify into literal.
Yeah.
And you can start losing the plot, really. So, but obviously, taking the wider point, people have been taking psychoactive substances as long as humans have existed. They've even either come across them by accident. What's this?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Or they've taken them because they choose to take them. But
I've heard some scientists say that psychedelics might be the reason why we're here, insofar as going back to ancient history, when it was just kind of like monkeys and apes running around, that when they came across mushrooms or psychedelic substances, it changed their way of thinking and their perception, and that's how they kind of branched off into more evolved versions of apes and monkeys, which eventually led to humans, and even humans now, there's humans that are dabbling in psychedelics, and humans are evolving into different branches. Some people are becoming more evolved than others and more aware of their spirituality or their own consciousness and energies and vibrations, whereas other humans seem to be stuck in this kind of old, very kind of simplistic way of thinking and belief systems, Like me, I myself, I was born a Muslim, so I was born into all these walls around me.
Yeah.
I had to eat these kind of foods, I had to live in this kind of way, I had to marry this kind of woman. Until the age of about 20, 21, I never really questioned it because I had no reason to question.
It's all you've ever heard.
Exactly.
That's what programming is.
Exactly. So I think that psychedelics are another source of information that give us information that we haven't heard before. The same way I was born with certain walls around us, humans are born with certain walls around us as a race, and psychedelics are almost on the outside looking in. And if we can just kind of have an experience with these psychedelics, it gives us the ability to expand our consciousness. And this is what I want to talk to you about, because I know that you have done ayahuasca specifically before.
Yeah.
We spoke about it briefly.
2003.
2003, yeah. And you had a very profound experience.
Very much.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, for me, and we'll maybe get into this in another interview sometime.
Okay.
There is a force that is manipulating human society, and it's coming from the unseen. Of course, people think, oh, that's strange. Well, if they realized how little we can actually see, they would be shocked if they haven't come across it. Humans can see a tiny smear of reality. It's just in a tiny frequency band that we can decode into what we call a visual reality. And outside of that is infinity, by the way. Quite a lot more to know. That's when people say, they think they know all there is to know. What? You know all there is to know? It's like religion, right? What religion is saying, according to mainstream science, some say it's a bit more, but not much. The electromagnetic spectrum, the entirety of the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. That's what mainstream science says. Some say a bit more, but I say not much. Mm-hmm. Visible light, which is the only frequency band that we can see, everything we see is within this band, is a smear called visible light, like I say, of the 0.005%. Now, what a religion is saying, or most of them, is that all you need to know is between the covers of a single book, within a smear of 0.005% of the electromagnetic spectrum when beyond it lies infinity. Now, I think on that basis alone, there's probably just a touch more to know than is there. And there's a touch more to know than mainstream science says it knows. So, it's like that great phrase from Socrates in ancient Greece, or I'm paraphrasing, wisdom is knowing how little we know. So therefore, that always keeps your mind open, because no matter what you know or think you know, one thing is absolutely certain and is undebatable. Whatever you know or think you know, there's always more to know. In fact, vastly, infinitely more to know. And so if you are manipulating the human population, what you have to do to keep them in your control is to control their perception. Mm-hmm. Because everything is perception. I agreed to do this interview because of my perception of you, right? My perception of you had been different. I might have said, no, I won't do that. Everything is perception. What we will do, what we won't do, what we'll challenge, what we won't challenge, what we'll support, what we won't support, all comes from perception. All human behavior comes from perception. Simply control perception, you control behavior. And if you are a few, and we are talking about a few in terms of this manipulative force, and your target population is billions, you cannot do that physically. They want to try to do it physically by connecting us to AI, connecting the brain to AI, but they've not done it yet. So the only way they can do it is by controlling the perception of the target population. Now, because we're multidimensional, and ultimately, I mean, what is the I? The I would suggest, is a point of attention within a state of infinite awareness, infinite consciousness. Now, that point of attention can be the size of a pea if we choose to make it so, mm-hmm. or ultimately it can be infinity itself. And if you are in anything close to that state, you are not manipulatable by a bunch of idiots that want to control the human society. So what you've got to do is shut your target population off from that expanded state of awareness where they'll see through your game, mm-hmm. to a point where they won't. One of the things that happens when you expand your awareness, and I am coming around to ayahuasca, when you expand your awareness, is you start to see connections. You stop seeing pixels, you start to see pictures. You stop seeing dots, you start to see pictures. The more you focus attention and are manipulated and encouraged to focus attention on the five senses alone, the more everything becomes dots, everything becomes pixels. Everything seems apart from everything else instead of connected. And so you don't want people seeing the connections because they'll see your connections and they'll see your game. Mm-hmm. That's what happened to me. So you've got to keep them in a state of five sense focus. Can I see it, touch it, taste it, hear it, etc.? Okay, it exists then. Can I not do any of those things? It can't exist then. And I've just described, actually, the foundations of mainstream science. Not by accident. You have to control mainstream science to control people's perception of reality. So you create a mainstream science narrative that basically describes a solid world, brackets, quantum physics has shown it can't be, where everything's apart from everything else. And when you come into the realm of the five senses and this whole realm of illusory physicality and materialism, what do you see? You see a world of limitation. You see a world of I can't. You see a world in which to change anything is really slow and laborious and almost, you can't change this, it's impossible, it's too big. And that's exactly where they want the target population to be, in five sense focus. Another thing that happens with five sense focus is, as with expanded awareness, you see that actually we're all expressions of each other. We're all points of attention in the same infinite state of awareness. Once you get into the five sense level, Everything seems apart from everything else, including other people. And therefore, you have the perfect situation for fault lines of division and divide and rule.
Yeah.
I am are this, so I am different to I am are that. And my I am are must have superiority over your I am are, and so we get the world we're in.
Yeah.
So something like psychoactive substances that take you out of five sense reality and put another expanded reality, another sense of the infinite possibility and potential of all that is. It's the worst nightmare of this cabal. He doesn't want that. I mean, go to America as the most extreme example, and you sit in a hotel room and you flick through them television channels until you get bloody wrist ache.
Yeah.
There's so many of them, right? 24/7, all day, every day. How many times do you see a program about the nature of reality? Huh?
Almost none.
Exploring the nature of reality. Exploring the nature of consciousness beyond the brain. How often?
Yeah.
Why is that when people are fascinated by that subject?
Yeah.
Because they don't want you to know who you really are. They want you to believe you are, as I call them, your labels.
Yeah.
You are who you are, the I, is your race. Oh, then we can have racial division. It's your sexuality. Then we can have sexuality division. It's your culture. We can have cultural division, and so it goes on. It's your income bracket. We can have income bracket division. And these labels are not who we are. They are not the infinite I. They are experiences which the infinite I is having in a smear of what we call time, another illusion, within this tiny band of frequency. And when it's over, after a very short period, we're out of the body. What is the body? It's a vehicle to focus our attention upon this band of frequency we call the world. And while that process is going on to keep us in control, so this human society is controlled, we have to believe that we are the labels and that the world they tell us exists, the one we appear to be experiencing, is A, how it really is and it's not, but also is all there is. This is why mainstream science, what they're saying is, you're born, cosmic accident, and then you die. Life's a bitch and then you die. And that's it. And of course, that focus of attention gives people a perception of reality which suits this agenda of control. What's psychoactive, and people have to do it in a controlled situation with people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because you can have bad experiences on them as well as good experiences on them. Let's not forget that. But what these psychoactive substances do is that they open the channels that have been closed by five sense focus.
Yeah.
Because you see, the brain, they thought the brain, once formed, never changed. Now they realize not only is that not the case, but it's actually the opposite of that through something called brain placidity. This is important in relation to this. I'll be brief. But with brain placidity, the brain changes the way it processes information on the basis of information received. This is why people's brains, and especially among the young, in the way they function, the way they process information, are dramatically changing because of the informational input from smartphones and digital technology. This has been well documented now, even by people in the mainstream. And so if you focus from cradle to grave only on the five senses, your brain is going to set up its neuron networks and firing on the basis of five sense focus, because basically that's the information it's receiving, so it then forms to process that information alone. And it shuts out all the other levels of self that are not actually, quote, physical, another illusion. But when you take these psychoactive substances, what it does is it opens those brain pathways. It opens those brain pathways so that you can connect with levels of reality that five sense focus is shutting out. And then you see, actually, this world is not all there is.
Exactly.
And I had a phenomenal experience in Brazil, in the rainforest, in 2003. I took it in the first night on my own, only time I ever have. And I had an amazing experience for 2 hours. And then the next night, I took a bigger dose. And for 5 hours, I went into, because as you know with ayahuasca, well, my experience anyway, it's not that you kind of go unconscious. You can open your eyes. And when you open your eyes, the world is pretty much as it is now. But your eyes don't want to stay open. They want to close. And when you close your eyes, you're absolutely in a different reality. And I started going in. It took about an hour to get really into it. And then this female voice started speaking to me. It took a female form. Absolutely as loud as mine is now. It's clear as day. And for 5 hours, gave me chapter and verse on the illusory nature of physical reality. How this is all an illusion. And while we may think it's physical, we may experience it physical. It's not physical at all. And I came back to England afterwards with total recall of it, remarkably. And I started investigating it and researching it and all this stuff. And I found that the evidence is already there that what I was told is absolutely true. Yeah. But different scientific disciplines are not talking to each other, so they don't get the whole. And also, there's tremendous pressure within the scientific arena not to go down these roads. Why? Because it opens up, hey, you're not only your labels, and they don't want us to know that.
And isn't it funny how antidepressants, alcohol, tobacco, all these forms of drugs are readily available and they're mind-altering substances, but they do the exact opposite of psychedelics. They close your mind, they narrow you into a kind of tunnel vision, and they affect your physical health, your mental health in all sorts of horrible ways, where psychedelics seem to have the opposite effect. There's no proven addictive, traits of marijuana or psychedelics. If anything, people who do marijuana or psychedelics, they start to question reality, they start to question life, they start to open their mind, open their horizon, be more open to love, be more accepting of other people. So it's you could plain to see that why the drugs that are good for you, or call them drugs and medicines if you like, are illegal, and the drugs that are very bad for you are perfectly legal. And if anything, it's part of culture. I mean, in Britain today, where we are just now, there's almost a pub on every corner of every street, And it's just like, it makes you really look at society and stop to think what's wrong with society when marijuana and psychedelics are completely banned and frowned upon, but when alcohol is readily available at the age of 18.
Yeah, well, of course, if people read my books about this cabal, where it came from, what it ultimately is, and where it wants to take the world, all that makes total sense. And again, it comes back to what I've just been talking about. If you want to control people, you've got to close their mind and focus their attention on the world of apartness or apparent apartness, because it's only apparent. And for goodness sake, don't let them get into any greater understanding of what the I is. The I is the awareness that's having the experience. If you say to people, who are you? What will they give you? They'll give you their name, they'll give you their background, they'll give you their job, etc. Overwhelmingly, they'll give you their job. I am Ma so-and-so. No, you are not a bus driver. You are not working in a bank. You're not working on the checkout. You are experiencing that. What you are is a point of attention within all that is, has been, and ever can be. Infinite awareness. And when you say things like that, that something is all that is, has been, and ever can be, the five sense mind can only perceive past through present to future. So how can anything be all that is present, has been past, and ever will be future? Because the world is not past, present, and future. That's the illusion of this reality. What's another way of describing all that is, has been, and ever can be? All possibility. That's what we live in. We live in a realm of an infinite state of all possibility. And what possibilities we experience are dictated by our perceptions of reality. Thus, if you get this down to its basic form, this conspiracy of human control is controlling humanity's perception of reality. Humanity's imagination of itself. And therefore, if you can be manipulated through this process of programming, it goes on from cradle to grave, to believe that you are little me, then that perception of reality will become your experienced reality. You will live a life of little me.
Yeah.
Not because you are, but because you perceive you are, and thus create that feedback loop between perception and experience. And this is why what will little me mentality, what will it experience? It will experience a predictable life, a life of basic acquiescence, because everyone else has more power and is more intelligent than them in their mind. And they will live a life of what some people might call drudgery, predictability. Every day is the same. Oh, it's Friday. We have fish on Friday. Well, try having it on Thursday, just for once. No, it's Friday fish. And so that's the way it goes. It's predictable. There's no adventure in it. But what happens when people, and so many people now have been through this, what happens when they start to expand their awareness and start to reevaluate their self-identity? And purely by reevaluating your self-identity, your consciousness automatically expands, because that expansion of self-identity from labels to infinite awareness automatically expands you into greater consciousness. What happens then? Your life starts to become synchronistic.
Very much.
Amazing coincidences happen. You meet someone and you say that, how could I meet you here? That's impossible. But this becomes more and more part of life. Because for me, bringing it down to a kind of a simple analogy, I guess in this hotel room now, there's it's not my hotel room, by the way. It's just been hired by the guys. It's bloody massive. I've never seen a hotel room so big in my life. Anyway, there's probably Wi-Fi. And if you said to people who didn't know about computers, who know nothing about any of it, that in this room there is a field of information which you can tap into anywhere in the world. It's a global collective reality. And you can tap into almost any information you choose. Then people would say, you're mad, mate. Yeah. You're bloody mad. And what would they say? Well, where is it then, mate? I can't see it. But now, because people know about Wi-Fi and they know about computers, if you said that to them now, they say, oh, yeah, Wi-Fi, computers, yeah, I know about that, yeah. You wouldn't be mad anymore. No, that's right, yeah, well, that's obvious, mate. I know about that, yeah. And the only difference between you're mad, oh, yeah, I know about that, is knowledge. That's all it is, knowledge. Knowledge of computers, knowledge of Wi-Fi. Before, without that knowledge, you're mad, mate. And so if you can control knowledge, you control perception of possibility, you control so much of humanity's sense of reality. Now, in that Wi-Fi field is vast amounts of information. The entirety of the internet is in that Wi-Fi field. And what a computer does is it locks in to that Wi-Fi field and it decodes it. And it decodes it into a completely different state, form, to what it is in Wi-Fi. Because if you said to people about the internet, what's the internet? They'd say, well, it's pictures on the screen, it's moving pictures, it's still pictures, it's text, it's graphics. Yeah. The internet is like that, but only on the screen.
Yeah.
Everywhere else, it's Wi-Fi, radiation fields of information and electronic coding, etc. If we come back to perception, what causes the person on the computer to go to that part of the internet and put it on the screen and not that part of the internet put it on the screen? Their perception. Their perception, which takes the form of their interest. If you're interested in sport, you're likely to go to a sport website. If you're not interested in sport, you won't go to a sport website. If you're interested in deep esoteric stuff, you'll go to deep esoteric websites. And if you're not, you'll go to the BBC and Sky News, right?
Fox News.
All that stuff, yeah. So perception is everything. It dictates everything. Now, this is the way I see it, coming back to how we experience reality. I say that process that I've just described is exactly how we process reality. The brain is not the origin of consciousness. It is a processor of information. And the question is, what information are we going to allow the brain to process? If you focus only on the five senses and dismiss any other idea of any existence beyond it, and that's your focus every day, your brain will process that information. It will not process information that you consciously are aware of outside of that. But when you start to open your mind, expand your consciousness, which anyone can do, you don't have to be cross-legged on a mountain. I don't even meditate. You can do it. You are allowing in what? Another form of expanded information. So the brain starts to reform placidity to decode that. And suddenly, you're through the process of information decoding in the brain, you're starting to become aware of a much greater reality. Now, again, we come back to perception. So the base form, just like Wi-Fi, the base form of this reality that we're experiencing is waveform information. Think Wi-Fi. And then you've got the five senses, which decode waveform information. That's what they do. Think of the ear. I'm talking to you now, and there's no words passing between you and me. There's an information field, a waveform information field generated by my vocal cords. People's ears then pick up that frequency, that waveform. They turn it into electrical information and feed it to the brain. And the brain, I would then say, decodes that electrical information into digital holographic information, illusory physical. And the world exists in here. And the same with sight, same with all the senses. The brain processes information which the senses deliver to the brain in electrical form. And because there's different parts of the brain, that the visual part is here, and they take the senses, these different parts of the brain, and they form a reality. And I say what they're forming is a digital holographic reality, which is manifested from the waveform, then electrical information that they decode. In the same way that a computer takes Wi-Fi and turns it into a totally different form on the screen, so we are taking waveform information and we're turning it into totally different form on our screen, which is this world.
Yeah.
Now, what part of the cosmic internet are we going to choose to manifest as a life experience?
So,
And the answer is our perceptions decide that. This is why we are living within all possibility, and our perceptions of possibility are dictating what part of all possibility we are deciding to go. If you like, bring it down to the internet, what websites we're deciding to interact with. Mm-hmm. And so someone in little me mode, I have no power, their perception of reality will manifest as a pretty low frequency because of the perceptual state, and a narrow band of frequency through which we are interacting with possibility and probability. And therefore, through that loop, we will then experience, decode a reality that reflects the perception. When you go through this expansion of awareness, you're now interacting with possibility and probability in a vastly expanded way, in a much more high frequency way. And so what you are able to bring into physical manifestation through the decoding process is vastly greater, not because you're better than someone else, but it's vastly greater than someone in little me, I've got no power mode. Mm-hmm. And that's why people's lives change and become much more synchronistic, much more of an adventure. Why? Because they are interacting with a greater swathe of possibility, and thus that's becoming their life experience.
So, part of this podcast, the purpose of it is I want to focus on solutions as well. So for people out there watching this who maybe are at a low vibrational frequency, maybe they're surrounded or living in conditions where their family are, either abusing them or mistreating them. Maybe they're addicted to drugs or alcohol or even daytime TV or reality TV, and they're getting all their information from these low vibrational places. Or what you're saying is to try, the best thing you can do is to try to change your environment, change the information you're receiving, try to surround yourself with positive sources of information or positive people or positive energies, as opposed to staying in that same environment. Because I think a lot of people listening to you will resonate with what you're saying, but they'll be stuck in a position that they can't get out of. So what do they do? Well,
first of all, it's the coach and horses, what comes first. And I'll get into that in a second. But I want to make this point. If you were looking at me now and you said, I'm addicted to drugs, what do I do? Mm-hmm. My first answer would be, you are not addicted to drugs. You are not addicted to drugs. Your body is addicted to drugs. Your brain is addicted to drugs. Mm-hmm. And you, the I, are not. And I'll tell you a quick story. From about 1996 to well past 2000, I did an enormous amount of research into mind control, both sides of the Atlantic, a hell of a lot in America. And I talked to many, many, many people who had been subjected to horrors in something called MK Ultra, a massive American military government mind control project, CIA mind control project too, that even came out in the public arena in the 70s. Though the true scale of it didn't, and the true reason for it didn't. So I met these people, and what they were doing, it's still going on today, but it's just more sophisticated now. They were using trauma to create compartments in the brain, compartments in the mind, but really in the brain, in the decoding processes. So they would make children who were terrified of spiders sit in a pit of spiders and snakes or whatever they're frightened of. They would literally make their kids, because they wanted them before the age of 6, before the brain pathways were fully formed, because then they could change the nature of the brain much easier. And so they would get them to literally watch animals being sacrificed, even people sometimes being sacrificed. It was horrific. And what happened, it's through something called dissociation. What the mind does, the horror is such, it's the same process. You know, when people have a car accident, they can't remember the impact. They can remember the run-up, and they can remember sometimes, they can't remember the impact often, because the horror is so much, the mind shuts it out. It puts it basically in a compartment like a honeycomb, it's symbolically, maybe even close to literally, but it puts it in a compartment. And so the rest of the mind doesn't have access to it. It's forgotten. It's a lost memory. but it exists. And they've created a situation. They did this, what MK Ultra was basically about, and especially an elite part of it called Project Monarch, named after the monarch butterfly. And they would program these different compartments. They used to call them alters, as in altered states. That's what the inside name for them was, these compartments, alters. They would create a front altar. That was the altar. I am going somewhere with drugs here. And the whole thing about it, you're not addicted, your body is, your brain is. They would create a front altar, and that would be the personality that if you met them, you'd think that was who they were. And it's who they thought they were, right? But in the back, in the subconscious, were all these other alters which were programmed for certain things, including assassination, also being, sexuality, really sexual in women so that they could be used for honey traps. This all goes on. People have no idea, most people have no idea the scale of what goes on in the world. Anyway, these are in the back and they stay there. And normally the front altar is what is basically driving that person. But when they want them to do something, think of Manchurian candidates. They give them the hypnotic trigger that pulls one of these alters to become the front altar, and the front altar goes to the back. Now the front altar carries out what it's programmed to do. It might be an assassination. And then the front altar goes back, this altar goes back, the front altar comes forward. The front altar has not experienced that, knows nothing about it. It's one of the things I've talked about at length in some of my books, the way these mind-controlled women and children are used as sexual playthings for some of the most famous people in the world, and name them in books, because they abuse them when one of these altars is brought forward. That goes back, front altar comes back. The front altar has not experienced the abuse. It doesn't even know it's happened, right? And what happens eventually, it's happened with a lot of people that I've met, many people that I've met, is they get to a certain age and the mind starts to become strong enough to break down the walls of these altars, and they start having vivid photographic memories of what happened to them. And the common stories and the common people involved are extraordinarily compelling. Anyway, this is where I'm going with this. I've talked to some of these people, and they've told me how they could be blind drunk or heavily drugged in one altar, and when they switch them, they have no effect of drugs and no effect of alcohol. One of them said to me, my biggest fear was having an operation and the anesthetic being administered in one altar. And during the operations, my altars switch, because the altar it would switch to that wasn't the conscious mind, the front altar at the time the anesthetic was administered, would not be subject to the anesthetic at all. Yeah. And you'd wake up completely awake in the middle of an operation. This was what she told me her greatest fear was. So this stuff about drugs, the brain becomes addicted. And you know what's happening now? There's another form of addiction. It's called smartphones, and it's called digital technology. What's happening is the brain, placidity, is so connecting with this digital technology, this digital stimulus, with people on their phones all the time, that it becomes addicted to it. And this is what happens, okay? People are going through their phones endlessly. And then eventually, even they reach a point where there's nothing really there more, so they put it down. In next to no time, they picked it up again. Well, what's happened? The brain, just like a drug, has gone, where's me fix? Where's me stimulus? And they think they're picking it up. They don't know why they're picking it up. It's almost a reflex action, but it's the brain consciousness saying, where's me fix? They're becoming addicted to it. And it's the same thing. But their brain is addicted to it. The true I, consciousness, is not addicted to it. So if we're talking about, and I said coach and horses earlier, if we're talking about what you do, it's not for me to tell people what to do, but what I can say is I'll just talk from my own experience. The key to everything, the first step in everything from which everything else comes, is redefining self-identity. Okay. So if someone's addicted to drugs, I say, what are you? They'll say, I'm a drug addict. Well, no, you're not. You're not. Drug addiction is something you are experiencing because your body has become addicted to it. What you are is the consciousness having the experience. So experiencing because your body has become addicted to it. What you are is the consciousness having the experience. So experiencing because your body has become addicted to it. What you are is the consciousness having the experience. So experiencing because your body has become addicted to it. What you are is the consciousness having the experience. So experiencing because your body. So use the experience, brilliant. If you like it, and if you don't like the experience, well, change it, because the experience is not who you are. It's what you're experiencing. So ditch the labels as a sense of you, as what I call an I am I am gay. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're having an experience as gay. I am Muslim. I am Jew. I am Black African. No, you're not. That's what you're experiencing, right? Do you think you're going to be a Black South African or a Jew or a Christian from the southern states when you leave the body? What? Of course not. This is just an experience in a narrow band of frequencies we call the world. And a very brief one it is too. So ditch the labels as a sense of I and redefine it. The I am a point of attention within all that is, has been, and ever can be. And that point of attention, as I said, can be the size of a pea or it can be infinity itself. It's a choice only of how much of infinite consciousness we seek or allow ourselves to connect with. And that comes from perception. If your perception is, I am little me, I am Ethel on the checkout, you will, by that perception, connect with a tiny fraction of infinite awareness. When you self-identify with being infinite awareness, you can do no other thing than connect with a vast swathe and as big as you like to expand into swathe of infinite awareness. At which point, why I say coach and horses, which comes first, at which point that self-identity transformation, the transformation of the sense of the I, will then transform your experience. Because if you get to that point, little me for a start doesn't exist anymore. Therefore, your little me experience must change because the perception that was creating it is gone. It's something else. So that must change your experience. And so instead of how do I deal with my drug problem, do I deal with my family problem? How do I deal with this problem and that problem? It's the coach before the horses. You're dealing with a manifestation of something without dealing with what it's a manifestation of. And what these things are manifestations of is your fake identity, self-identity, what I call phantom self. I've got a book called Phantom Self about all this. And therefore, when your self-identity changes, your experience that comes from that self-identity will change. And what happened to me with my phenomenally challenging awakening in 1991 was, if you break it down to its foundations, I shifted my self-identity. I was no longer David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952. I was all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience called David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952. And when, in that period of transformation, that immensely challenging 3 months, basically how long it took, of reevaluating my entire sense of reality, it was in the middle of that I went on the Wogan show and talked about being a son of God. Remember that?
I do.
David Icke thinks he's the son of God. He thinks he's Jesus. No, I was in a state of utter bewilderment because my consciousness was shifting in a massive way. And I was trying to articulate what was happening without really understanding then what was happening.
Yeah.
And so the term Son of God was a way of trying to describe, without really understanding it at the time, this movement of self-identity from I am David Icke to I am that which is having an experience called David Icke. And it came out in the bewildered period of the 3 months as, I'm a son of God. But that's where that really came from.
Did something trigger that awakening?
Oh, yeah. My experience in Peru, that experience, which was like just before it all happened, not long before the Wogan show, happened in February 1991. What happened to me, just very, very quickly, for people who haven't come across it, I was going through my life. I was a national television presenter with the BBC, and then, as well as, I became a national spokesman for the British Green Party. And again, synchronicity in my life has just been ridiculous. How I've done all these different things, and you look back and they're ridiculous, really. I mean, I went from joining the Green Party as a member on the Isle of Wight to being a national spokesman in a matter of weeks. It was ludicrous. But what was happening through my life is that doors were opening, and when I had the Green Party experience, given all that had gone before, how I became a footballer, how I became a journalist, how I got into television. After the Green Party experience, where I just became a national spokesman out of nothing, from nowhere, and it wasn't something I basically went for, the doors just opened. I looked back and I thought, something's going on here. I saw a pattern, that it was like walking through a maze and some force is opening the doors and closing them. So you go down the right channels and just things were just opening to me. And I thought, this is not me doing this. Well, obviously on a deeper level, it's me and in a more expanded way of doing this, I guess. But David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, ain't doing this. So what's going on? And that's why I started the question. Anyway, around that same time, in 1989, when the Green Party, when I joined it, I mean, almost no one ever talked about it. I mean, talk about a man and a dog. You used to do press conferences, and there was a man and a dog when the dog could be bothered. And then through 1989, serious things happened environmentally that it really put the environment in the public eye. And in the summer of '89, we got 2 million votes in the European elections. It was like, and suddenly, as a spokesman for the Green Party, there was more than one. There was 2, I think. One man, one woman, and you were suddenly thrust into the public arena as a bloody politician, And it's like, I only joined the Green Party on the Isle of Wight a little while ago, and here I am, Yeah. But during that same period of 1989, when this is going on, some very strange things were happening to me. First, the main one was this. that if I was in a room alone, it was like I wasn't alone. And this continued through 1989, and it got more and more tangible until early maybe the spring in 1990. I'm working for the BBC, and I'm in a hotel room called the Kensington Hilton, just across from Shepherd's Bush, the studios. And I'd just done a BBC news program, and I came back, and I sit in this empty hotel room. I'm sitting on the bed, and the presence in the room was so tangible. I said into the room, "Look, there's someone there. Would you please contact me, because you're driving me up the wall, right?" And literally shortly after that, I'm on the Isle of Wight, and just down from where I still live. And I was playing football with my son. He was a little boy then, but, he's a big strapping singer-songwriter now, Gareth. And we were going to get some lunch in a cafe on the seafront, near the railway station on the seafront at Ryde. And a railway worker stopped me, because I used to present sport for the BBC, started talking to me about football. And then when that conversation was finished, I realised Gareth weren't there, but I knew where he would be. He'd be in the news shop. So I go in this newsagent shop, and there he is. He's looking through the steam train books. We like steam trains. And I stood there at the door, and I said to him, "Come on, Gaz, we'll go in the town and get some lunch," because the cafe was packed where we were going. And as I said that, I went to turn, the atmosphere changed. Now, what I understand now was going on is there was an electromagnetic field had manifested around me, and that's why I felt the atmosphere had changed. And I'm standing there thinking, this is strange. And then my feet started to burn, almost as if something's pulling them into the ground. This is, again, electromagnetism when I look back. And it wasn't a voice, but it was a very strong thought form going through my mind. And it said, "Go and look at the books on the far side." So in a completely bewildered state, I trot over towards the books. And I knew this newsagent shop. The books it sold for tourists and stuff, come on holiday, were Mills and Boon and Barbara Cartland, romantic novels, not my scene. So I go over there, but in the middle of those books was this other book. It's called Mind to Mind, and there's a woman's face on the front. And Betty Shine, she was called. And I turned it over, and I read the blurb. And she's a professional psychic. It was the story of her life, really. And I thought, psychic. I bought it. I thought, I wonder if this woman would be able to tell me. I've never seen a psychic in my life before. I wonder if this woman could tell me what I've been feeling around me for the last year, literally a year. So I go to see her. I read the book in 24 hours, went to see her. Went a couple of times, and it was we had a nice chat, hands-on healing, because what I said to her was, "I've got arthritis." It wasn't not true, but it wasn't the real reason I went, and I weren't going to tell her the real reason because I didn't want to influence what she said. So I said, "Look, I've got arthritis. Maybe your hands-on healing might help, exchange of energy and all that stuff." And she's doing the hands-on healing. And on the third visit, I'm lying down on this medical bench in her front room. And I felt like a spider's web on my face, which, again, I didn't understand at the time, but now it's very clear. It was an electromagnetic field. That's why it feels like a spider's web, like when your hair stands up on the back of your neck in an excited crowd. And I was kind of taken aback when I felt it, because I'd read in her book that sometimes when other levels of reality are trying to lock into you, you feel a spider's web on my face. Why? On your face. Why? Because they lock into you through an electromagnetic field. That's why, which locks into your electromagnetic field, what we call the auric field. Anyway, 10 seconds, 15 seconds after I felt that, and it said nothing to her, she's doing the hands-on healing by my left knee, she launches her head back and she says, "My God, this is powerful. I've got to close my eyes for this one," right? And then she starts telling me, this is March 1990, and I'm a BBC television presenter and I'm a national spokesman of the British Green Party. She tells me I'm going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. And all the things that have happened to me since, she said, basically told me this is what was going to happen. And I'm sitting there going, what? I'm going to do what? Mm-hmm. One great line she came out with, because this happened twice. The second time I went after that, the next time I went, the same sort of thing happened. And that was it then. I never went again. But one of the lines she was bringing in from out there was one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that can change the world. And how that there was going to be this transformation of human consciousness. Well, there's no bloody sign of it then, I'll tell you. But my God, there's a sign of it now.
Yes.
So very soon after that, the BBC let me go. Again, very synchronistic. You know, again, it's a bad thing. Oh, God, the BBC will let me go, right? I've got these letters of commendation. They're letting me go. What's going on? You know, what can you say at that point? Oh, I'm a victim. I am. I'm being sacked. But actually, it was perfect because it set me free to pursue this road, which if I was presenting television programs all the way through from then on, it wouldn't have been possible. Anyway, I wrote a book called Truth Vibrations up to the end of 1990 about what was happening to me, not that I really understood in those days. And that went off to print. And then I got this constant feeling that I needed to go to Peru. Where that came from, I don't know. I'd seen them play in the World Cup once, you know, a few times, but that's all I knew about Peru. But Peru, and I would go walk down the street and I'd look across at a shop, like a travel shop. There'd be a display of Peruvian holidays in the window, and I'd turn the television on. There'd be a Peruvian documentary suddenly. Anyway, what I do is I get in a plane to Peru, not knowing where I'm going. Long story short, amazing things happen while I'm in Peru. But where it led me was to a place called Siyustani, which is they say it's an Inca site, an ancient Inca site, but I think it goes back much further than that. And it's not far from Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, they reckon, near Puno. And anyway, I'll cut the story short. I end up there. I hired, because it was out of season, I hired this tourist taxi bus thing to take me out there with a Peruvian guide who was taking me around, and there was a driver. And I went out, and the reason I went out is I saw pictures of it at the hotel where I was at in Puno, and it looked beautiful, all Inca ruins and stuff. And like I say, I think it goes much further. Anyway, I go there and I walk around. I had this great urge to be there, to go there. I've got to go there, got to go there. And so I walk around this place. Beautiful it is, for about an hour. And it was beautiful, and it was a nice experience, but it did not match this, got to go there. It didn't match it. So I go back to the taxi bus thing, and I'm pretty disappointed. I think, didn't match this. What was all that about? Anyway, I get in, and we start driving away. And I'm daydreaming, as usual, out of the window. And I looked at this kind of mound stroke hill to my right as we're driving along, just not far from, just down the road, literally. And all I could hear in my head as I was looking there was, come to me, come to me, come to me. And that was kind of the point where you think, you're losing it, man. You know, there's a freaking hill talking to me now. What's going on? Right. So anyway, I said, can you stop the van bus thing? I want to go up that hill. I won't be long. And I went up there. It was about an hour, more than an hour, because of what happened. I walk up there, and it's a piercing, hot, cloudless Peruvian day. I had a big red nose to prove it. And I get up there, and there's all these stones around, and I walk into the center of some of them. And the newsagent's shop repeated, the experience repeated, but in a much more powerful and profound way. I'm stood there, and I'm looking across to Siyustani and the distant mountains. It's absolutely beautiful. And suddenly I'm feeling my feet again. This burning in my feet, which felt in the news shop. And then I'm feeling like a drill going into my head, and I'm starting to shake. And there's another flow coming the other way. And then my arms go out at 45 degrees, and I'd made no decision to do it. I just went out like that. And then I heard this, first thing I heard was, they will be talking about this 100 years from now. Thinking, talking about what? And then what seemed the most crazy thing I heard, it will be over when you feel the rain. And I'm sitting under a piercing sun with no clouds. It will be over when you feel the rain. Clear as day, I heard it. Anyway, this energy goes on getting more and more powerful. And eventually I'm shaking like I'm, stuck in the mains. And when you drive a car and you lose time, really. You're daydreaming as you're driving the car. You can't remember where the last 2 miles has gone. You've subconsciously been driving the car. Well, it was like that. I would go and I would come back. And when I came back on this occasion, I noticed that over the distant mountains was a light grey mist. Mm-hmm. And I watched it get darker and darker and darker. It was like fast forwarding a video in the speed that it happened. And I thought, it's raining over their mountains, right? So over the next, it weren't very long, this literally straight line of stair rod rain came towards me like curtains coming across the sky. And if you put that in a movie, they'd say, oh, what? It's ridiculous. It happened. So a wall of stair rod rain coming towards me, by which time I'm shaking like crazy. And when it hit me, it stopped. The energy stopped. I'm drenched immediately because it was such fierce rain. And my legs were gone then. And my arms had been there all that time, And, you haven't got to hold them there long before they start to ache. Not when all this was going on. As soon as it was over, agony in the shoulders. And my legs were like Bambi and stuff. And something happened to me there, clearly. And what followed not long afterwards was the 3 months with the Wogan show in the middle. And I look back at it, and what I was feeling was like information and concepts, insights, intuition were pouring into my conscious mind. And it was just too much to process. So basically, it was like a computer, too many keys. It goes, can't process that. Oh, I'm freezing. All right. And for 3 months, I didn't know where I was. And this process, this transformation. You can expand your awareness in a way over time, or someone can come along and burst your bubble. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you're there, and by being there, you get this tidal wave of concepts, information, and insight, which is just too much to process. But as a result of that, it gave me the massive historic levels of ridicule that set me free from the fear of what other people think. My life's been like dominoes falling, everything running to something else. And after this 3 months where I didn't know where I was, what I was doing, it was like the computer unfroze. Yeah. And suddenly people were saying to me, I thought you'd gone mad, Dave. But you're the same bloke that I knew before. Well, I looked at it, and I interacted with people the same way, but I wasn't. No. I could see the world in a completely different way. Do
you think you found your purpose?
Yeah, a completely different way. But what happened then, of course, is your mainstream media and much of the public, they move into or coagulate and solidify into a perception of you that was you for 3 months.
Yeah.
And they think that's you forever. And they pigeonhole people. That's what they do. People can't change, because anything where they were really famously did something, whatever it was, that's them for life, even though, completely different things have gone on since. But what it did, like I say, was give me that experience of mass ridicule and set me free of the fear of what other people think. And it also gave me a honeymoon period, really, in terms of this information, because that which I'm exposing would not have seen me as a threat, even though I was exposing it. Mm-hmm. Because, they think he's mad anyway. Yeah. But what then started to happen, particularly after 9/11, which I exposed in great detail in a book called The Trigger that I've just got out, which exposes who really did it as opposed to who we told did it. That changed. And now, instead of being laughed at in the street, I'm stopped in the street to be talked to in very respectful terms about the information. So it's been in many ways a perfect journey, even though, of course, you only know where you're going when you get there. But when you get there, you can see why all the things have happened before that you thought were random.
Fantastic. I think you've had an incredible journey, and I'm grateful to have had you in the show to listen to your experiences. I think there's a lot more to learn from you. I wanted to talk to you about other subjects as well, but I'm aware you're a bit short on time today. But maybe we can continue the interview another time.
Well, I've seen your list of subjects,
yes,
right? So it'll definitely take another interview. So I'll be very happy to do it.
I think so. It's been a pleasure. I think for me, what I've taken away from this interview is you maybe can't fix all the problems in the world, but you can fix yourself.
Yeah.
You create your own consciousness. So instead of focusing on all the problems and all what's wrong, focus on yourself, make yourself better, and the world around you changes.
Well, first of all, your world will change.
Yeah.
Because as you change, your world will change. As your perceptions change, particularly perceptions of self change, your world will change. But if you look at what we call the world, it is the collective perceptions of humanity. That's all it is. Yeah. It's the collective perceptions of humanity, the individual and collective perceptions. Therefore, when people look at the world and they say, it's just too much, it's just too big, the problems are just too massive, what can we do? Well, if the way to change it was via, quote, physical means, I would say to you, you're right, we ain't going to change it. We've got no chance. Because physical changes, as we perceive physicality, doesn't really exist. Everything is slow and laborious, and you need committees and someone to take the minutes. But hold on a minute. That is just the projection of human consciousness. You don't have to change that. You change consciousness, and that must change because that is an expression of consciousness which created it. Perceptions that created it. Change perceptions, change the world, because the world is the sum total of our perceptions.
What a beautiful note to end on. Thanks very much.
Really great to talk to you about it. We'll talk to you again. We must. I really enjoyed it.
100%.
Brilliant.
That was brilliant, man. Awesome. I'd love to also extend the opportunity to you to, if you ever want or you're called to do plant medicine, to come with me to Costa Rica. I've got the places that can facilitate it in a very nice environment in a great way. And it's like, I think there's a lot more you can bring to the world. I think you're doing a lot as it is with your books and your talks, but I feel like from what you've experienced in plant medicine, I can imagine the information you would get from that, because you're already in tune with all these other spirits and beings and other realms, you know?
Yeah, well, I'll take that on board. Like I say, I'm open to anything. As long as my intuition says do it, I'll do it. I'm just about to start this book, which is actually about all these things. So maybe maybe that will work out. Who knows?
Never know.
I'm certainly open to it.
Fantastic. I hope we keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It would be great to do it again. Me too. Especially if I'm up in Scotland, I could do it again.
Oh, I'd love it, yeah. We'll have more time next time.
Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.